Pawpaw, Sammy, and Alley Bug here. Uh, Today, I want to go over my worms again. I got a little note from a fella the other day. I'm not going to call any names, but I'm going to read it verbatim. That way, I don't forget. Anyway, it started off like this. This is a hunger bin. You are using completely wrong. Moisture at the bottom, fill the bin with compost, feed scraps pretty often. You need to watch videos on hunger bins. Okay? My answer to that was, if you use night crawlers, you are partially right. They will go deep sometimes. Red wigglers stay around 6 to 8 inches unless something unusual happens. If you use the wrong worms, the compost in the bottom of that bin will turn with age, not with worms. Correct about scraps. Feed them sparingly and do not overwater. Thank you. I do appreciate your comments. Okay. Now, today, I'm going to break that down and tell you what's wrong. Before we get started, I traded my worm bin for a beehive. And reason being, I'm going back into it commercially. There's my new bin over there. My daughter, Samantha Starkey Homestead, is selling more compost of vermiculture, worm poop, than she can make. And she asked me to gear back up. So what I did was, the hunger bin is great for a single person with a small garden. It makes a little bit at a time. Beautiful compost. You can't beat the bin. It's fantastic. All right, but it's not really good for heavy commercial. You need a bed set up. Uh, when she called me 3 or 4 or 5 weeks ago, I had 4 totes. Now I got my bed, and I got room for 6, 8, 10, for 12 more totes, plus my big bed now. And my worms are multiplying like crazy. But now let's get on with this. All right. Your green worm bin is about 4 foot tall, 3.5, 4 foot. I don't have it in front of me. It's the estimate there. All right. You fill that bin with compost, okay? What's going to happen? And you put your food on top. Whenever you go run your vermiculture, you put your food off to one side. The worms go to it, and you harvest the other side. That's a proven fact. That's not guesswork. So if you're feeding on top of 3.5, 4 foot of compost, where the worms going to be? They're going to be where the food is. You can look. Let me tell you, you can train anything with food. I have a turtle out in the front yard, in the front ditch, that in the summertime when it gets hot and he finally comes out, I can stomp the concrete 3 times, the driveway, and his head pops up, and I throw him food, and he'll go back in his hole wherever he goes under that cupboard. My grandfather, since I could walk, because he was a farmer, he was home all the time. We would eat, got through eating, rice, bread, anything left over, we'd walk over across the field to the river. He would stomp the bank, and before he could even throw the food in, the water just go crazy boiling. If you ever been to a fish farm and watch them feed, you know that's a fact. So you can train worms, turtles, snakes, anything else when you try hard enough. All right, now, I don't use night crawlers, so I'm cautious what I say about night crawlers. So I'm going to stay with my red wigglers. I know them. All right, to start with, know you worm. Red wigglers is a compost worm. It don't eat dirt. Yeah, I'm sure it gets dirt in the system, but it eats leaves, dead grass, decaying leaves. Actually, your bacteria and fungi starts breaking down the leaves and grass, and the worms eat the fungi and the bacteria, most of it. Now, and Look, it's not complicated. Set your bin up with your bedding, you shredded paper and chopped up leaves and a little grass. You can use peat moss, you can use coconut coir, it don't matter. Uh, what you put in there, it's a bedding. And if they get desperate, they will eat the bedding. But don't worry about the pH and all about this and all about that. Nature, if you go out anywhere in your yard or the woods and start taking pH readings, it's going to differ, I guarantee you, every 20 feet or so. It's going to be different. It's going to be damper. It's going to be wetter. It's going to be wet. So what you do is you moisten your bedding, moisture, not soaking wet, but good and damp, and forget about it. All right? And people talk about, well, you got ideal conditions for those red worms. Use common sense. I worked construction all my life out in that blistering sun. I would come home. I didn't want to walk into a house that was 45, 50 degrees. But I know guys that would not even go inside if it wasn't 50, 60 degrees. What's the ideal for a human? What's the ideal for a dog? What's the ideal for the worms? Hey, keep it between the ditches. Just don't run off the road, you okay. Now, it's not rocket science. You set up your bins, your water, and your feed. And while I'm saying set up your bins, let me show you this. This is where I raise my eggs. I put my worm eggs in here. Whenever I harvest my castings, I put the eggs in here. I don't want to give my eggs away. And here's your bedding, people. Can you see it? Look, see the paper? See the leaves and pine straw all chopped up in there? And look, it's damp. See how dark it is? But it's not so you can't squeeze water out. Now, this, oh, and something else if I can find it. I talk to you all the time about my medicine cabinet for my garden. In here somewhere, here it is. That's a cinnamon stick. This is a fresh one. I took the old one, just disintegrated. Put that in your worm bin, and your nitwicks and your little pests tend to go in. And then every once in a while, you take it out, clean it, throw it back in there. Now, the damper it gets, the better it works. But that's just a tip. Now, here's the thing, people. If you got this being even close to right, the worms are going to be okay. But I'm going to tell you something. I've had people tell me, I use peat moss and I'll set my bed up. I'm talking about like today they set it up. 3 days later, I get a phone call. Man, I got the prettiest worm vermiculture you ever seen. A pound of worms, if you're lucky. I eat a quarter of a pound of food every 3 or 4 days. Unless you got ideal scientific, conditions. What he was doing, his peat moss got wet, crumbled up, and looked real pretty and soft. It takes time. What I'm saying is experience. Once you start raising these worms, experiment. Put your food in one corner and wait a couple of 2 days, 3 days, and rake it back and look. And you'll see where they've been eaten. You'll see the difference in that little spot and your bedding around it. That's compost. This is bedding. So what you do is keep moving your food around. And when it gets to the point you figure you got quite a bit of bedding, what you do is you take and you run your compost. And the little fine stuff that comes out is usually compost, worm compost. Look, just remember, set it up, get started. Don't worry about, oh my God, the pH might be a half a degree off. The water might be too much water. Worms breathe through their skin. When they get dry, they die. They can actually survive in water if oxygen is being entrained into the water, like a fish tank. they can actually survive for a while. They got to have moisture to survive. So if it gets a little wet, you know, and I don't put lids on my bin, the top is going to evaporate and dry pretty quick. So the worms can come up and get out of the soaking water. They'll travel. They'll go where it's comfortable. So will you. So will anything else. Look, like and subscribe, and I hope this answered a lot of questions. I really do.